what is the biggest thing that stands out to you as far as what's exciting in the next upcoming months, and especially for what you guys are going to be talking about here in this next panel?
So from my perspective, I think it's just such a great landscape for startups. There's so many different opportunities that are out there right now. Open innovation is part of our S&T 2030 study, and it has really allowed us as government entities to reimagine what S&T looks like and how that we interact with non-traditional partners. So that's going to be a great tie into the panel that we're doing on the Innovare Advancement Center. This is our take on open innovation from our directorate and how we're going to execute within that area.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, Karen, take it away so much. Thank you so much. And we're excited for the panel. So take it away.
All right. So I'm going to ask the rest of our team to come up and join me, please.
You go, Steve. Then I'll come and Dan.
So, all right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Roth. I'm the Chief Engineer at the Air Force Research Laboratory Information Directorate in Rome, New York. And so with me today, I also have Steve Colenso. He's with the Tech Transfer Office with me in the Information Directorate. This is Heather Hake. She's the President and CEO of the Griffiths Institute. And this is Mr. Dan Madden. He's a principal at Squadra Ventures. So you may be asking, what do all of us have to do with each other? And why are we talking about open innovation together? And so that's where we're going to go with Innovare Advancement Center. I'm going to act as the moderator for this panel, give you a start, give you some context for where this came about. And then we're going to go to the rest of the three team members to talk about what Innovare means to their organization and how they're part of that community building opportunity. But in the meantime, if you guys want to sit down, relax a little bit. And then we're going to go around, and we really, really want to take enough time to do questions at the end because we want to hear what you guys are thinking about how you contribute to Innovare as well. So that's going to be really critical to us as part of that conversation. So we're going to try and keep our comments to only the first half of it so we can take lots and lots of questions. So as I introduced myself, I'm the Chief Engineer of the Information Directorate in Rome, New York. So about 5 years ago, we really were starting to go down a path as a directorate of saying, what does innovation mean to us? We were in an area where, as the information director at Rome, New York, upstate New York, at the old Griffiths Air Force Base that had been bracked 25 plus years ago, but there was a subset of government entities that were left behind. And so as we started to talk about change and our portfolio that's focused on C4I and cyber, as we call it in our government talk, so command control, communications, cyber, all of those kinds of good stuff. Everything that's so critical for technology innovation today was all centered in our directorate. How do we take advantage of the portfolio, the $1.5 billion that we do in upstate New York every year, and start to think about things differently? How do we have different impacts on that portfolio? How can we stretch it in different ways? How can we take advantage of tech transfer success stories like the likes of ATAC, if you've heard of that system? That was developed originally in Rome in our research portfolio. And then that technology, which is an Android tracking system that is now used across, not only across the military, but also civilian entities, FBI, DHS, all those kinds of great things. How do we take those success stories and find more opportunities for that in our portfolio? And that's where we started to ask questions of what can we do to change? But we kept hearing stories of like, we're in Rome, New York. We're in the middle of upstate New York. No one wants to come live here. We kept hearing stories like, well, we're not on an Air Force base. You know, we just don't have the resources of an Air Force base. There's only so much that we can do. We kept hearing stories of, well, we gotta stay in our lane though. There's only so many things that we can do as a government entity, and we're only one part of the Air Force Research Laboratory. It was those kinds of stories that made us step back and say, but the things that make us different and the things that make people say, yeah, we really got to deal with that Rome problem. We don't know what to do with you guys. And say, but what is the power in our differences? And how can we do things differently as an organization that are taking advantage of that power? The fact that we aren't on an Air Force base, that we are embedded in a massive tech park that is filled with contractors, dentists, doctors, distribution areas. How can we take advantage of that? How can we take advantage of the fact that we're with 250 miles of 25% of the engineering schools in this country? How can we take advantage of the fact that we're all in the old Rust Belt in New York State, and there's significant economic development that the state wants to put into upstate New York. Take advantage of our massive political ties on what brings us to New York. And that's where we started talking with our community partners that all wanted to do the same thing, the likes of other research institutes, but that work on bio and tech, the likes of manufacturing facilities that work on microchips, and say, how can we come together as a unified voice where we all feel like we're these really small fish in a pond and do something a little bit different? And then we felt really empowered when the S&T 2030 study came out that said, open innovation, you guys should be doing this to make some changes. And that's where Innovare Advancement Center came from, was talking about tech transfer, talking about our partnership intermediaries and local small businesses, talking with venture capitalists, taking these opportunities and coming together as one unified voice to have such a more massive impact than we could just have as one single government entity that felt like we were just that Rome problem sometimes to the other Air Force. So the Innovare Advancement Center is, and I really got to give a shout out to the community manager at the GI. It's like Disney. It's a brand that has so many different entities where we can all have different parts in it. There's the tech transfer element. There's the massive facility that Heather's going to talk to you about that's really going to be the Disney World and the crown jewel. But it's all of us coming together in that unified brand to do our business. So that way when someone comes to us and says, I have this cool idea, they can find the right person to do that. And we don't have to say, we don't do that. That's not in our mission space. Sorry. It's not in our mission space to do economic development, but we know there's a need for it because we need that team to make Rome the shining jewel that it is and to really showcase our tech so we're finding better non-traditional partners. And so about 3 years ago, probably at this point in time, we came together and started to write down a strategy. We wrote down a strategy together as a team that wasn't owned by any one person that says, this is what Innovare Advancement Center is going to be. It's going to be about tech. It's going to be anchored in our technical portfolio, the Information Directorate. We're going to use that as a starting point with the hope to grow further than that. It's going to be about entrepreneurship. It's about connecting the pipeline of entrepreneurship opportunities that are available in New York, but also to the likes of down here at Capital Factory. How do we make sure that Texas startups have opportunities to come to upstate New York as well? And that's through Innovare and what their next steps are going to be. And it's about STEM, recognizing that sounds like a simple thing, but recognizing that everyone from my 2-year-old daughter, Charlotte, to all of our huge retirement community has space to grow and learn and advance and advocate for our technologies as a result of that. We're just so excited with how far that we've come in just the past couple of years. And I really think that shows the power of the community building behind the brand, that everyone's able to put their best foot forward and contribute to this without having to step into space that their company may not be best phased for. Like, we're the government. We're not best placed to run a facility, run security, things like that. Our best foot is our technical capacity and the PhDs and researchers that we have on hand to push out in that community and inspire innovation as a result of that work that we're doing. So with that, I'm going to start turning it over and going through the rest of our panel members. Like I said, we really want lots of questions through that. So make sure you're tying up those questions. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Steve Colenso. He's our ORDA and so our T2 representative.
Excellent. Thanks, Karen. And thank you to Capital Factory for not only hosting this panel, but this whole event. It's events like these that really sort of start to scratch more than just the surface of how the government and industry can work together and that sort of bi-directional flow. If anyone's been following the Air Force track today, you will have heard this, the one theme, which I think is sort of starting to percolate to the top, was a document that was coined by the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Brown, which is accelerate, change, or lose. And it's really the ability to anticipate change and be ready for it so that when it comes time to actually put practice or where the rubber meets the road, you go ahead and follow that anticipatory change and then you can actually make the change. Of course, it's not easy. And typically the government, we're not amazing at it, but we definitely need to get there. And one way we can do that is with something called technology transfer. And at its basic level, tech transfer is the sharing of information. But it goes a little deeper than that, in that we have a number of tech transfer agreements that allow the government to work with industry and academia without an exchange of money. And what that really does is it drives innovation through partnerships, and it allows that sharing of information without a contract, without a large amount of red tape, so that we can start to look at the hard problems, break them down into smaller problems, and start to solve those smaller problems with innovative solutions. And the idea really behind it is, how does the government share information with the proper companies that have the proper skill sets for the solutions to the problems that we have? And there's a number of these agreements, as I just said, but it really, it takes a hard look at, everything's not always about money. Certainly that runs the world, and as a company, you need money, you need capital to actually get the job done at the end of the day. But it really starts with the right people and the right tools and resources that aren't just money. We can actually do that with these tech transfer agreements. So as the government, we can allow access to our facilities. We can allow access to some of the equipment we have that we have the capital to purchase for other projects, but a smaller tech startup entrepreneur might not have access to. And we also have some unique agreements. Karen alluded to it, called the Partnership Intermediary Agreement, which is with nonprofits, i.e. the Griffith Institute, which you'll hear from Heather, which allows us to do things in a different manner to push forward this tech transfer. And the idea really behind tech transfer is, if we make those connections, we drive innovation through partnerships, we work on hard problems, come up with some really cool, unique solutions, anticipating change in the future, that technology, we, the government, will be consumers of it at the end of the day. But what also happens during those relationships is our industry partners, entrepreneurs, tech startups, what have you, those solutions that are jointly developed between the government and industry can be commercialized. There's protections for IP in all these agreements, both academia and the industry. So while the company's productizing, commercializing something that was collaborated on with the government, whether if it started with a patent the government owns, or just an idea with some of the subject matter experts, we can then take some of those improvements on the product that we might have started with if it was government owned, and then buy that back as the government. And that's like really the holy grail of taking intellectual property information from the government to industry, and then the improvements we purchase back as the government for the purposes that we would normally use it, military and what have you. And those avenues that are available to the country is really sort of the foundation of that innovation. That isn't just a transaction, here's some money, go build it, follow all the rules, all the red tape, and then maybe at the end of the day we didn't get what we wanted because of all the things in between that we just mentioned. And we're doubling down with the Innovare Advancement Center, not only being a facility, but as Karen mentioned, a brand and a strategy that's really wrapped and rooted in tech transfer, which allows the flexibility to open the doors to the international community, to some tech startups, entrepreneurs that ordinarily wouldn't ever even blink at doing work with the government. And what that does is it allows, like I said, access to the subject matter experts, but it also facilitates that difference of thought, because we understand that all the training we get on the government side of things, we might be missing the mark, or we might not be looking in an area that we should, but someone it has ingenuity as sort of at their core, and this word innovation that we've heard a zillion times today will be able to sort of leak onto us. And then when we start to expose some of the hard challenges we have, those ideas start to percolate up and really cool solutions can happen. And it's really that intersection. It's the intersection of our challenges, our expertise, along with that difference of thought that comes from industry and that will to start a company, because it's certainly not easy to be an entrepreneur. But before I kick it over, I'll talk to you a little bit about a Partnership Intermediary Agreement. And so it's a PIA, we call it PIA because everything we do in the government has an acronym. The PIA allows us to use a nonprofit to help us find those collaborations, to find people that are willing to or wanting to license some of our government patents, or some of the capabilities we have that are government owned. Find the avenues, find the companies that could use this technology, and then facilitate the actual meeting of the government and the industry partner, and then actually help us get these documents signed, or written, and then signed. And that's where really the power of tech transfer meets acquisition in this PIA contract vehicle. It's maybe a misnomer to call it a contract, but it kind of is. And that's another confusing thing in the government that you've seen all week. But helping us with the PIA, helping us from a perspective of a nonprofit organization, as well as the historical experience, I'll introduce Heather Hage, and she could talk to you about Innovare and how the Griffiths Institute is helping both tech transfer and Air Force Research Lab. So thank you.
Steve.
Yeah.
So we were joking this morning when we checked in because everybody got a badge. It was a certain color, right? Blue. There's academic, there's industry, there's government, there's investors. So I stood in front of these 4 bins and I was like, do I take every single one of them or none of them? Because fundamentally, our service at Griffiths Institute is as a nonprofit organization. And so while we're in service to government, we're also in service to the industrial community in upstate New York. We're in service to the investors with whom we work. We kind of sit in the middle in this really interesting space as the partnership intermediary, as Steve described it. But our nonprofit purpose lets us push beyond the boundaries of perhaps what is the government's immediate interest and think bigger and broader about how we can advance not only national security with some of the solutions we introduce in Rome at Innovare Advancement Center, but how we can also enhance our economic competitiveness. So I come at this conversation at a personal level a little bit differently. I grew up, who's been to New York in the, just here in the room, who's been to New York? All right. Now who's been to upstate New York? Okay, a couple more. I like it.
Yeah.
Rochester in the house. And Joelle's Rochester too. Where are you from? Oh, you've been there. Oh, okay. Now, how about Rome, New York? 1, 2, okay. So we're whittling down the funnel, right? Oh, one back there. Awesome. So I grew up in what we call the Mohawk Valley. Rome is the town where Innovare Advancement Center and sorry, Karen, I'm going to step on your butt. I paced crazy, so I'm sorry about that. So I grew up in the Mohawk Valley, which is the region that we describe where Rome, the Air Force Research Laboratory, Innovare Advancement Center, and this concentration of really cool engineering schools and other universities sit. And when I was a kid, Griffiths Air Force Base was like where it was at. So I grew up in a town called Utica. It's about 15 miles away from Rome. And the kids from Rome had the coolest cars and the coolest starter jackets. And I totally just dated myself with that comment, but those who are children of the 80s will understand what I'm talking about. So the coolest everything. And it was like we woke up one day and the base was moved to Ohio. And that was my recognition as a teen at that point in time was, well, what happened to all the kids with the cool starter jackets and the great schools and the great everything? Like it transformed our economy almost overnight. And so for many years, that was considered like a blemish on our local history. Like, oh my God, how are we ever going to recover? We're never going to recover. It's never going to be the same. So I graduated from high school. I went to a college locally and kind of bopped around as I did my early career stuff. And then spent 20 years, I worked for the State University of New York, one of the largest comprehensive systems of public higher education in the country. And I there worked on innovation and commercialization programs. We built our IP portfolio. We started new companies. We're doing all this cool stuff. And then I come to realize 90 miles down the road in my hometown, after the BRAC was left behind this incredible treasure that was the Air Force Research Laboratory, one of only a couple of assets that were left behind when this happened. And when we look back across the lessons that history has taught us, that laboratory surviving what was perceived at the time as being a devastation to our local economy and regrowing up around it, as Karen described, this massive business and technology park that's now full of defense contractors working in cybersecurity, warehousing. We've got a really cool and eclectic group of defense and aerospace companies that have grown all up around us in the park there, and the Air Force Research Laboratory is the center of it. Not to mention, my colleagues are humble, so they won't talk this way, but not to mention that these folks leverage the funding that they get from the Department of Defense for direct R&D at a rate of 4 to 1 with other customers. So the grit and the tenacity that is a part of the culture that we have in Rome to drive innovation forward is really unique. And the fortitude and the long-term vision that it took to go from what was perceived as a devastation from which we'd never recover to get to today where we built this incredible park around us is noteworthy. So that brings us to today. So I spent 20 years away, and then I come back to my hometown 20 years later to see what the folks who stayed and who built this thing have done. and find myself in the running for this position as president and CEO of the Griffiths Institute, which is a nonprofit talent and technology accelerator. What that means is we focus on looking out at the rest of the world and finding the best and brightest folks who are willing to come and work in our mission space at Rome in C4I and cyber. Because, as Karen said, we are not we're not a lab in a town, in a in an urban center where we have a great R1 research university next door that's pumping out graduates who can work on our challenges. We are nestled in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains, which is beautiful and picturesque, but we are surrounded by farms, not by universities. But you pencil out a little bit further, you go 250 miles, and we've got 25% of the country's leading engineering schools in our backyard, so to speak. So our mission at GI looks like, one, going out and finding the best and brightest talent to come to the Mohawk Valley and be part of our mission. The second piece is technology acceleration, where we support Steve's team in technology transfer, cultivating the best ideas that are coming out of the laboratory, looking for commercial purposes, and figuring out how we can do that matchmaking point A to point B. We're at a strategic inflection point, having moved in to Innovare Advancement Center, which is, kind of wish we had a virtual tour going up, but point for next time. It is a 150,000 square foot facility from wall to wall. It's where they used to fly B-52 bombers back in the day. It's absolutely enormous. And the center core is kind of more like an office building, and then you've got two hangars on the right and the left side. So on our first floor, think about like a technical test bed, and then on top of it are stacked cool and funky collaboration spaces, more like the stuff you see here, except for you guys have way better snacks, I gotta tell you. These are my notes from today. You have way better snacks, barbecue is definitely way better, and I'm dying for those chairs. That is, when I get home, we're getting those chairs. So our first floor is really the technical test bed. So we have two laboratories that are managed by AFRL and the Griffiths Institute together for quantum information sciences and for neuromorphic computing. So the quantum lab, if I knew how this stuff worked, right, I'd probably be a millionaire. I have no idea. But the quantum nerds love it. Like if you're a quantum geek, there is no better place than here. We have ion trapping, superconducting, and photonics all under one roof, about 15 feet apart. So for anyone who's got that interest in quantum information sciences, quantum computing, quantum communications, we have one of the world's leading capabilities, and it's being outfit right now. We've probably got about 3 months until that laboratory is up and running, and our intent is to make it open, as Karen said, an open innovation hub where teams from startups, not just government researchers, but startups and others can come in and take advantage of us like a user facility. So quantum labs, neuromorphic computing labs, and then the two wings on each side. If you walk out our back door, we overlook the old airstrip it used to be the runway. That's now more for local and regional service and private planes. If you step out into the back, we're home to a 50-mile outdoor drone testing line that runs from Rome all the way to Syracuse. So 50 miles, fully instrumented, where we can do beyond visual line of sight testing for small UAS. And then coming up next with some fantastic investment from our local leaders and our county executives group, you will find Skydome. And Skydome, when it is done with construction in the spring, will be what we believe to be the world's largest indoor-outdoor drone testing facility. So we can test small UAS in GPS-enabled and GPS-denied environments, flying in and out of the wild. So those are the technical capabilities. And you step your way upstairs into our Griffiths Institute spaces, you'll find a 250-person auditorium, snacks, not as cool snacks as they have here at Capital Factory, but we have decent coffee. And then up on the third floor are where our Air Force teams really mix it up. You'll find the teams working on quantum algorithms. That's where we have a node into the IBM Q network. So the kind of assets that you just can't get access to anyplace else. And that's really what's part of our mission space, is to open up access to these incredible resources in which the Air Force has invested for its own purposes. Sorry, Karen, I'm standing right in front of you. In which the Air Force has invested for its own purposes to do cutting edge R&D. But our mission is to open that up